Welcome to Self Care You podcast, which is the intersection of self care, advocacy, and compassion for self caregivers. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And so we're going to continue this, shall I say, series that I've been doing the past couple of weeks, which is pretty much a podcast of Chris Cuomo with Tyler Perry, and it's the formative power um, of struggles. And so this is the last segment that I'm going to do regarding. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do, because again, when it comes to self-care, is every aspect of your life. It's every aspect of your life, of everyone's life, in the sense of we cannot separate ourselves of these little tiny parts. There may be opportunities or situations where you may have to hold off parts of yourself because you need to like take care of what's right in front of you. But whether it's at the end of the day, at the end of the moment, to make sure you really go back and to address yourself, because this is how we're going to become successful. And when it comes to being successful, it's not only about, being able to live in a safe environment, in a safe neighborhood, being able, to buy something without having to think about where your next meal is going to come from. It is being able, to have, it's just so much more. And that's going to be in another, I'm going to do another series as well. And so in saying all of that, let's continue. And I would definitely encourage you all to, view that particular podcast, because I really believe that it's a discussion that needs to be had, because we're in this world of like, oh, let's feel so good and happy and joy, let's do self-care so that we can just feel good about ourselves. No, when it comes down to it, it's that too, but it's also so that you can get through the mess that's just in this world, in this society, and that really comes down so you can get through the day in the moment. It doesn't mean that is always so negative per se, but it's almost like it's not okay to be so upbeat until you completely ignore it's almost like the trash it's not even in the backyard, it's right in front of you and you're stepping over it. So this podcast period, Self Care You podcast is so that you can take care of yourself. There are so many resources, so many things that you can do. And I'm here to tell you, on a personal basis, on a professional basis, when we do not address ourselves, and it's not intentionally, I want to say that because I was like that. I was like, oh, you've heard me say it before. I didn't know this about myself. In that, when we do not address things that are in front of us, and I know I've said it on my Self Care You nuggets that I do several times during the week, in that, and I may have said it here, but what I have learned is that for whatever you may have experienced as a child, even if you don't have a memory of it, I would definitely encourage you to address it, to sit down with it, whether it's in therapy with yourself. And I always say, even if you're going to therapy, it's what you do outside of therapy. So you can have, those opportunities, because life continues, outside of therapy. And even though therapy, again, can be a wonderful thing, it does a whole lot of good for individuals to be able to go through things, but it's also what you do outside. And so, in saying all of that, and so with the last part, of what they were saying was, and so with this segment, it's pretty much continuing, the power of struggles, and I'm having a brain fart right now. It's the power of struggling. It was something else in their title, and I didn't write that part down. I only just wrote down what this episode is going to be about. So here we go. One of the things that Chris was talking about is that, like when someone is going through something, especially, like, you know, whether it's on the news, someone popular, or I mean, even, you just think about in your circle, whether you're at work or within your family, is that a lot of times you really do not know what's going on with that person, that you really don't see what the other person is going through. And I can even attest to that. I would say two, maybe three things. And, because you think about when you show up at work, we don't carry the load of our home life to work. But unfortunately, the workload ends up coming at home. And but the thing is, we may think we don't carry that. It shows up in different ways. But in saying that, on the surface, you may think that someone, like I said, you can see a couple, so, oh, they're doing so well. And you may have no idea what they're going through. I mean, as far as you know, there can be domestic violence. Someone could have lost a job. They could have death in the family, even if you just think about an individual yourself. Because like I said, have experienced, I would say, over my lifetime, now I say maybe four things. But one thing I would say everyone knew, like when it comes to death, a parent or a family member being ill or sick, and especially if someone passes away, we tend to share those things, but anything else we don't. I'm not saying you need to share, you can use discernment, but my whole point is saying that is that sometimes you can be in the company of something. You might be best friends with somebody and you may not know what they are going through. You may not know that there's abuse, there's some type of level of trauma. Sometimes it's not always physical, it can be emotional, it can be verbal. And so just saying that we don't know. The other part that I would like to add is, and this kind of comes into part of the conversation, because you're like, Sharon, what does all of this need to do with self-care and being successful and with my job and working and things? It has everything, because you've heard me say it before. We cannot separate ourselves. Everything is connected. We cannot compartmentalize ourselves. The main thing is that you're having the tools and being able to acknowledge and have a self-awareness. Hey, I need to do something here. Okay, so the other thing in saying that too, in that when you are going through something, and especially for people who appear to be the strong person, not saying that they're not, but the one, as they say, that strong friend. And we heard the saying, oh, check on your strong friend. And especially if you are a person who's pretty much a helper and you don't ask for help. And then the thing is, when you ask for help, it seems like you get very little response. And there's a couple of things that I want to say about that. And I know I've talked about it in Self Care You Nuggets, formerly Conscious Sharing Moments, formerly Conscious Sharing Moments, in that when you reach out for help, or it could be a parent that you're going through something and no one checks on you, calls you, or whether you're calling someone, they're not calling you back, they're not picking up the phone, you could have left a message. Again, going back to what was just said, you never know what someone is going through. So in saying that, whether they're going through something or not, what I have found out, and this is personally and professionally, A lot of times people don't have the capacity, the emotional capacity to support you. Some of it is on an unconscious level that they may do it. It's like the nervous system gets flooded and they freeze and they cannot call you. Because I know, like for me, like on a personal basis, especially when someone is going through something, I can be there for you, but I may not show up in the way that you want me to. So, meaning that, I guess you say I freeze up a little bit, which is really ironic. So, meaning that I may not have words because I'm really a feeling person. So I can definitely be there because sometimes people just need the space. They need that sacred social space. So again, do not take it personal because sometimes some people do not have the emotional capacity to support you in the way that you need. The other thing that was discussed as well is that Chris had recognized that um, let's he used an example of his son, and let's just say that he can be triggered. It can be triggered by anybody, but let's just say he can be triggered, and this for all of us. But he was saying that he can be triggered, and then you could end up going, quote unquote, after that person. You're reacting to that person. Now, sometimes I can say for myself that I may not recognize it at the time because sometimes it's deep. And there have been times that, quote unquote, yes, even me, Sharon, may have gone off on someone. And when I've done it, because not that it's an excuse, but I was like, but it's the result of, so that means that I need to go deeper within myself. It's like, what is this? What is this that has activated within me? And you've heard me say before, sometimes it's both, meaning that sometimes people truly be triggering you because of their behaviors. And then sometimes they can be triggering you because of their behaviors, but it's our reaction, to it. There's something deep within. So either way, it's still something deep within, but you have to use the discernment of whether or not, like, it's almost like if that person is intentional in that, and especially if the person has a reputation of being a certain way, is that a person you need to be around in the first place? Sometimes it's something that, either way, is still something that you may need to work on. And again, this is how you're being successful in life, because in being successful in life is being able to walk through the storms. And it could be like, okay, do I need to walk? Do I need to run? Can I relax a little bit? Can I be okay? It's almost like, what moves do you need to make, and where you can have the emotional capacity to be able to support yourself. Because that's when it comes down to it. Because we know at the end of the day, no one is coming to save us. Sometimes we may be able to have some support, but in the end, it is all up to you, and you can do it. You can do it. And so, in recognizing when you are projecting, when you get triggered, and you regard, whether it's a child or not, or an adult, or whoever it may be, that you're able to recognize that. Now, the other thing I'm going to say is, for those of you who have children, I have nieces and nephews and godchildren, but especially for those of you who have the wonderful opportunity, and even though I say wonderful, for some individuals it may not be, but who has the opportunity of raising a child, in that it really gives you the opportunity to work through any childhood experiences, that any childhood experiences that you have had. You may not think so. Most of the time, people think about it, oh, this is my opportunity where I can give my child the things that I didn't have. You can, but the other thing I'm going to say about that, be cautious about that too, to make sure you're giving them the opportunity to work through the things that they need to work through so they can have the characteristics, the characters of the things that they need. Because if they're not able to handle struggles, to handle rejections, to handle disappointments, because by trying to suppress that from them, that's not helping them at all. So it's giving them the skills to be able to handle those things. And that's just like giving them the skills to be able, even though, if you're in a position to be able to create a cushion for them financially, that's very helpful as well. And so in recognizing your to recognize anytime that you are activated, and especially knowing where you may be projecting your own, things, that is to say things towards others. And sometimes you may not know that at the time. And when I'm saying that, that this is self-care you. And when it comes to, self-care, everything always comes back to you. So what that means is when someone responds that way to you, it's kind of like you could have your interactions, because sometimes it may not have anything to do with us personally, but I just say where your interaction may trigger or activate someone else, and they may be projecting on you to have that understanding. And sometimes you may need to make the decision, and especially depends on like how often it happens. You may need to separate yourself, to distance yourself from that person. And so that's the other thing. The other thing that was discussed is the fact that um being a helper, again, kind of being a helper, especially if that's your natural state, is again when someone is helping you, when you're asking for help, it's almost like, do you expect that? One thing I will say, because there's a lot of times people say, oh, you should never expect, if you're giving from your heart, you can be given from your heart. But one thing I will say, sometimes people can take advantage of that purposely. And so use your discernment when it comes to that, because especially when we're talking about, there's one thing where sometimes people again may not have the emotional capacity to be able to help you out, but sometimes you may not even need their emotional capacity. It could be something else, whatever that might be, even though you can say it's passing judgment or whether or not somebody can help. But my thing is, if someone continue to ask you for help, and then when you are asking something of them, it can be draining. And so use your judgment. That's the main thing I can say about that. And so I don't think it's an expectation, to be honest. I think over time, because we are as humans, we have this need and desire to be connected. Sometimes some people may um deny that. I mean, even if it's sexual, that's a form of connection, even though it may not be emotional. But at some level, there's still a part of us that may be seeking something out from someone else. And so over time, there is some type of connection that happens. And so I don't think that consciously people are expecting something, but just as a human being, it's almost like, really? And so again, use your judgment, because this is part of you taking care of yourself, of how much you are able to give out. You get to decide that, because just by giving, it may not even be helpful for the other person, but you get to decide how you helping that person. And so the other thing is to We talked about the strong friend. Oh, it's like I'm reading something and I'm like, what did I write down? And pretty much, to be honest, I have addressed most of these things. Yeah, so it's just one more thing. The last thing will be is there's this view of success. But now I'm talking about more so the external success, like people with quote unquote money, the car, the house, being able to go on vacations, who want to succeed in life and who goes after the money. But all I want to say is when we really think about who isn't going after the money in some form of fashion, it's just that some jobs pay more and some jobs don't. And I've had the opportunity, I would say, to be in some circles and, and to be looking at, I would say, looking at reading more books and looking at individuals who are, let's say, millionaires. And there is and I agree with this. It's almost like to really be able to help people and to do what you really want to do, it takes money and it creates a sense of freedom of you can be comfortable, you can be financially comfortable, but that is it. It will not allow you to expand yourself as much as you would like to. And so, in saying that, we will bring you to our sponsor, which is the Self Care Financial Services. And so this is sponsored by Sharon D. Brown, Self Care Financial Services. And Sharon is a licensed clinical social worker and a financial freedom crusader. She loves helping people to help themselves, and she's on a mission to help mental health and wellness practitioners to build a financial foundation for generational wealth. She wants to remind individuals that most families are not prepared for the financial burden and challenges of having being diagnosed with ADHD, autism, or Asperger's, with anxiety, with depression, and even with schizophrenia, and that individuals are not exempt from anyone in their family from having a heart attack or stroke or even being diagnosed with cancer or dementia. She really wants people to be financially comfortable. But again, everyone doesn't always have that extra money. And so she wants you to be prepared if you or someone in your family was to have a heart attack or stroke or to experience an injury or become disabled. And so contact her at bit.ly MH Protect Your Family Today. And so contact Sharon for your financial services need. And saying all that again, when it comes to being positive about success, is meaning celebrating people when they, reach six figures and seven figures. Because I can even remember, it's kind of like, especially when you're watching the news, and even, I say when it comes to the community, oh yeah, they change, and yeah, people really do change, but not in the way that you think, though. The mindset is really, really different. I remember I was watching somebody. it was on social media, and someone who makes millions of dollars. They may be a billionaire, I'm not sure, but I know at least on the social media it has it that they're making millions of dollars, and they were saying they're like, oh no, I'm not going to spoil my kid. The only thing I'm going to do for them is, be able to pay for college, for a house, and it was something else, if they need. And then in the comments flooded like, oh, well, what they think that they're doing, they are helping them out. Their kids need to learn. But one thing I will say, what individuals don't realize, again, we're talking about building. It's like each generation doesn't need to start all back over. And so it's good to be able to have a head start. And so if you're able to allow a person to have that cushion, again, not to quote unquote protect them from the harshness of the world, because that's a disservice, because they never really learn how to stand in their truth, and to be able to make the decisions, and then when hard things come, to be able to have the skills and the abilities and the emotional capacity to come through that, because that's what ends up happening when you're being too protective. And so there are ways for individuals who have money to be able to have healthy children who are able to give and continue the legacy of, of having generational wealth. And so one question would be, how will you be able to celebrate that, to celebrate individuals in, for the internal, because even though you may not always know they have internal success, but you will over time. It's almost like when you think about it, for those of you who meditate, not to say the person themselves, they may not always notice, the success, what they have gained, but usually the people around them do. But of course, when it comes to external, success, people notice those things. And so again, everybody has different opinions when it comes to that, but that's what I truly believe. Again, it's almost like, yeah, I wish I would have had, a cushion when it came to me going to school. I wish there was a cushion. And so my goal is to create that cushion for my family. It's not just to make it easy, but to give them opportunities. And especially when it comes to later in life, that is where that cushion really, really helps, because there are plenty opportunities so that people can learn the harshness and the struggles of this world. So why not give them something that they can benefit from? Because along the way is to be able to teach people about financial legal, I'm about to say legality, financial literacy. And it's not just that, how money works, and to be able to put things in practice. And so when it comes to the power of struggles, how are you integrating self-care in your life, in your family life, so that you are able to do the things that you want to do, and that is to live in joy, despite the storm. And that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with being, upbeat and content. However, don't ignore the trash, the garbage that may be in front of you, because believe me, it will implode and explode just when you don't expect it. So find different ways in which you can embrace the struggles in your life, and to be able to support others, if only if you have the emotional capacity. But the main thing is to do the things that you need to do to take care of yourself, so that you can be for yourself. So again, thank you for joining me for this episode of Self Care You podcast.